Welcome to Season 3 of the Canadian Powerlifting Podcast, the bi-weekly show that brings you the best of powerlifting in Canada. Our three co-hosts include Ryan Stinn, holder of the highest equipped total in Canada, as well as owner of Unparalleled Training Centre in Moose Jaw, and co-owner of Inner Strength Products, Steve Cassioli, IPF world record holder and medalist, third strongest Canadian classic powerlifter of all time, and owner of Cassioli Strength and Conditioning. Lastly, Avi Silverberg, world bench press medalist, national team coach, and co-owner of MyStrengthBook.com. Today's episode starts right now.
This season of the Canadian Powerlifting Podcast is brought to you by MyStrengthBook.com. MyStrengthBook is a web-based platform for powerlifters to build workouts, plan training programs, and assess training metrics that lead to better performance on the platform. Tracking and analyzing training metrics allow you to uncover key trends and insights on what works for you and the precise variables that lead to greater success. Say goodbye to pen and paper tracking and hard-to-use spreadsheets. Say hello to MyStrengthBook. Sign up now for a free trial at www.mystrengthbook.com.
Hello and welcome to the Canadian Powerlifting Podcast. You're tuning in on another episode, and we have one fantastic guest here that has joined us, Clifton Pho. Clifton Pho, if you don't know who that is, he just deadlifted unofficially at the Canadian Powerlifting Union National Championships, the unofficial junior world record and the 66 bodyweight class. And I'm sure you've seen the video. He is an unbelievable lifter. He placed second in the world last year in Killeen, Texas, and he's heading to Belarus this year. And this was one of my favorite interviews. Just such a young man, but so much wisdom in his process and methodology. We get into talking a lot about his sumo deadlift, his programming, his cues, his hook grip, how he builds up his hook grip strength, and how to transition from a mixed grip to a hook grip. He talks a lot about his programming, his approach to training, and things like that. Unbelievable young man, and I can't wait for us to roll this interview. But first, let's quickly chat about some things that have been happening in our world. Steve, really quickly, we haven't podcasted since you went to the Arnold. You went to the Arnold. Tell us how the experience was for those of us who couldn't get down there. It looked unbelievable. Tons of great performances. Tell us from your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, the Arnold was an awesome experience. I mean, we've talked about this before. Just the venue itself is just like no other. In terms of the competition, it went very, very well. Ended up winning the 66 kilo class with a PR squat, PR deadlift, PR total. So it went very well. Going into the meet, I wasn't feeling the greatest, but I mean, on meet day, I kind of just went by feel and 9 for 9.
Put up a great total. And I know that you got dethroned a little bit with the squat world record, but your lift certainly looked fantastic. Looked like you had more room in the tank, and looking at doing a little bit more probably at Worlds this year. How do you feel about the squat record that got taken away?
I mean, I knew there was a few guys like right around there, and it's to be expected at that level. And going into it, I don't really care if it was that wasn't one of my goals, but it's obviously, it was one of them, but not a main goal. Like, I wanted to keep that record, of course, but at the same time, the total is what counts, right? And I'll have my shot to take it back at Worlds.
Yeah, I love it. And I know that we talked about in the last podcast that there was a quick turnaround between the Arnolds and Nationals. And you're sort of trying to think about how to actually plan your training within that 10-day period. How did you actually do that 10-day period between Arnold's and Nationals? What did you actually do in the gym?
So like the prep leading up to Arnold's, I mean, my volume was like really, really high. And then the last few weeks, it got pretty intense. So after the Arnold's, I think it was a 12-day turnaround, and I felt, like pretty beat up after the Arnold's. So it's like, you know what, I got to give my body a few days recovery. So 4 days recovery. And I trained once, hitting like, I think it was 70%, just getting back into it because I was feeling a little sore. I don't want to injure myself leading up to Nationals because I need to qualify and hit a total, right? And then I trained once more about 4 days out from nationals. So I trained a total of 2 days in that 12-day turnaround. And to be honest, I think the recovery did me really well because I still hit a deadlift PR at nationals for not even touching a deadlift in 12 days.
Yeah, so that was unbelievable. So first of all, if you ever have to do a quick turnaround, hit up Steve because he's done it now. But also, yeah, just really quickly walk us through nationals. So you did nationals. You just sort of, I was handling you that day. Squat was just really easy breezy. Same with bench press. But then I think at the beginning of the day, you were just like, you know what, I'm just going to save myself and try to go for a deadlift PR, in which you did. So can you just tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so deadlift is like the past few years have been, I would say, my weakest lift, and put a lot of work into it, the transition to hook grip and stuff. So I really wanted to, I just really want to keep like pushing it and see what I have, and going a little bit more conservative on the squat, I think obviously helped that. And like I had some energy when it came down to deads to pull a nice PR there.
Yeah, and you mentioned your transition to hook grip, and we're actually going to get into talking quite in detail about transitioning to hook grip with Clifton. But you did secure a spot on the world team, and you're heading to Belarus. I want to turn the spotlight on Ryan now. So Ryan lifted equipped at the national championships and had a little bit of adversity actually in all the lifts. So maybe just walk us through the the squat and bench press. You're not a true power lifter at a nationals, so I guess Ryan can say that he's a true powerlifter now. But no, seriously, walk us through the squat and bench press and what happened.
I was gonna say I didn't have adversity in all the lifts because I only ended up doing 2 of them. Squats felt really good. Like I hit my opener at 370 and it moved so fast. I got like almost emotional about how quick it moved because I was so excited about how the day was gonna go. Unfortunately, it didn't continue that way. I got called on depth on my next 2. Going 390 on my second, getting called on depth, and then going 395 on my third, just trying to hit a small PR and getting called on depth again. So it is how it is. You know, I've never been a overly deep squatter, and that's how it goes sometimes. So gives me confidence with the speed of 395 though. So really hoping to hit something at national or at World Games in the summertime, that a big PB. So gives you some confidence going into that to hit this training cycle a little harder for squats. For bench,
now I know on bench press there was again some more adversity here. I was actually there on meet day and I was sort of seeing what happening, and I'll tell you what I think from my perspective. But why don't you share first sort of what was happening? You bench press attempts? No, you did 4 bench press attempts because they give you a redo, but they should have actually given you a 5th bench press attempt on your last one. So just walk us through that whole process. What was going on?
So my first attempt, I still don't really know what happened. Well, I do obviously, but so I went out. 275 was my opener. Really comfortable opener. I've opened there for a while or near there. Warm-ups felt good. First one I went out, I brought it down and it sat on my chest for about 5 or 6 seconds before I got a press call.
It's absolutely crazy. If you have Ryan on Facebook, I encourage you to go watch that video. Maybe Ryan can toss it up on Instagram too at Stindler. But yeah, it was crazy how long they held you on the chest there. Literally, I've been in powerlifting for over a decade, and this was the longest press command I've ever seen. And
I remember watching it, but I don't remember. Was there any like was the bar like completely stopped? Like I wasn't really dialed in there.
So if you watch the video, like I didn't feel it moving at all, but if you watch the video, it comes down, hits my chest, it does a little bit of a waver and then settles. And then I sit there and sit there and sit there. And then finally got the press call, and it was like a half a press beat, I guess. Of
course.
But I didn't beat the press command, which I have to say, Avi, I didn't beat the press command.
Hey man, we're not gonna share at all about beating the press command because I don't want people to know about my bench secrets, all right?
So I got it. My coach went to the jury and they gave me a relift. Unfortunately, I had to follow myself, so I only had 4 minutes of rest. Hindsight, I maybe should have just taken that extra time and gone for a second attempt. But in the moment, you just want to get it done with, right, and have a chance to go for your second attempt for real. So I went out for my rear lift and almost the exact same thing. My press call was good, but just no gas in the tank that quick of a turnaround. I went and tried to refocus and sat down, and I've had it happen once. It would have been my maybe one of my first 10 meets. I missed my first 2 benches and got my third. So I've been there before. Like I kind of, I know the feeling of how it is to kind of go into missing attempts. So I went out for a second attempt, still confident that I could get it. And, but I think I just kind of rushed everything that attempt. I brought it down, pressed it out front, and just couldn't lock it out. So finally, I had my third attempt, fourth attempt, whatever you want to call it. I had Otis come back and do a bit of work on my shoulders and my triceps and stuff, trying to kind of loosen things up after my 6-second hold on my chest. And then my wrists and stuff were a little jacked up from that too. So went on for my fourth attempt, my last attempt, widened my stance out a little bit because I felt like my feet were too narrow and I wasn't getting a good leg drive out of it. So I set up differently a little bit and I pressed it out. And honestly, at the time, I really didn't know what happened. I pressed it and then I was up and all of a sudden I start tipping to my left. And I start, like, there's an overhead camera view on the live feed, and I looked left and right a few times. You can see me say what's going on because I had no idea. I actually stood up, like they racked it and I didn't get the lift. I stood up and I looked at the bar because I thought it was misloaded. Like it was so uneven. And then after I came off, like the one thing that came to my head was if it wasn't misloaded, it had to have been a spotter touching it. So again, my coaches went to the jury and said, hey, did a spotter touch that? And at this time, they're already stripping down the bar and stuff like that. And the jury's like, no one touched it. And then they asked the referee and the referee said, no one touched it. So, I mean, whatever, I bombed and I was really pissed off and I had a little cry and stuff. And because, I've never bombed before. And it's, it's one of those moments of pride that, you kind of never had that happen. You've always been safe and conservative. And then Joanna Reber, who'd been videoing my lifts, brings a video back and you can clearly see the spotter on the one side grab the bar and lift it as I'm coming to lockout. And I mean, it was clear as day. He grabs the right side and starts lifting me. And he just holds it the whole time as I'm falling, basically. And so we took it to the jury. And now the jury doesn't know what to do because clearly there was spotter intervention, but deadlifts have already started. So I don't know. In the end, I went out there and I said, like, it sucks.
Man, I can't, man, I need to watch what I say here. But it really pisses me off that I've handled over 2,000 attempts internationally. Every world meet that I've been to, I've protested at least 4 lifts. And I swear to God, 3 out of 4 lifts, the jury overturns because I'm coming with a legitimate concern or a mistake that happens on the platform. There is 0 chance at a CPU Nationals of getting anything overturned because the jury is just not willing to listen. It's like, instead of them just acknowledging and accepting that there was a mistake, they just blanket say, no, this is just an angry coach or an angry lifter, and we're not going to do anything about it. In fact, what should have happened is that if there was lack of clarity around what was actually happening on the platform for your lift, what they should have done is they should have actually stopped the meet at that point in time and had a discussion about it. But what pisses me off is that nobody actually stops the meet and has a discussion in the moment to try to resolve whatever was happening. They just let it carry on and assuming that the coach coming to the jury is in the wrong as a default. And yeah, man, that really makes me feel for you, buddy. Makes me feel for you.
And I mean, I had the discussion with some people afterwards saying the same thing, basically, right? And I think the problem is twofold. I think initially part of the issue is that every coach runs over to the jury every time they get a call against them, even though it's a legitimate call, right? If you get a 2-to-1 depth call because you were high, don't go to the jury and complain, right? Just because you think you were deep enough. Two refs saw that it wasn't that way. If there's a legitimate reason for it, go to the jury. But I think, unfortunately, too many people run to the jury as soon as they get a call against them. And the jury gets tired of it, right? So they go to that default no position. Secondly, I think you're right. In a case like that, when it was my meat on the line and all they had to do was basically say, hey, stop. Like, let's go ask the spotters, hey, did anyone touch the bar? And maybe they wouldn't have admitted it. It doesn't matter. In the end, it doesn't. I mean, in the end, I'm not complaining. I'm not calling for anyone's head or anything like that. It happens. But, it's a shame my day had to end that way. But I think it's important that we try to learn from that and we try to grow as a sport in the country. Because you're right. Like, if I go to a jury at an international meet, there's a good chance I went to the jury for a reason, not because, oh, I thought that, my lifter was deep enough, even though I couldn't see. So I think the jury should be there. The second thing I kind of want to say about juries and nationals is
the third,
whatever, however many it is now.
This is the third now.
The last day, the last session, they had a 5-man jury at nationals. And, Gino probably in his own words announced that they put a 5-man jury because these lifts are so important. They don't want to have any mistakes. And I think that's just really insulting to everyone who's lifted all week, saying that their lifts weren't as important. I think if you set a standard for your jury through the week, and at nationals for us, a lot of times that's 1 or 2 people. That's the standard for the whole week, right? You can't have a better chance of having your lift overturned or corrected on the last day because you lift on the last day. It doesn't make sense to me. So that's all I want to say. And it's nothing to do with, I assume that what they had was they had more refs that were just idling. So they said, hey, why don't we run a bigger jury? But I think if you set a standard for your jury size, you have to run that all week.
But you got another big competition on the go. How you feeling for training for World Games?
Good. Yeah, like we were talking about before we started recording, that I'm going to change up my lifting here for a little bit. I'm just going to go down. Usually I squat 4 days a week and deadlift 3 days and bench 3 days. Right now I'm just going to squat 1 day a week, deadlift 1 day a week, and bench twice a week, and then have 2 accessory work days. Generally, I let my accessory work get pretty slack because I get tired after all my main movements, so I don't do a lot of accessory stuff. But this way, it's going to allow me to focus more on some weak point accessory work and really try and bring up some weak stuff, and then just try and do a higher dose of training on 1 day and then let a full recovery happen. So it's going to be interesting to see how this feels. I'm going to probably stick with it for at least 4 weeks, maybe 6 weeks, and then reassess from there. At that point, I'll be about 12 weeks out, so I can kind of go back to my standard style or something in between and see how it goes. But if I feel strong, I might stick with this for a little longer.
Well, I'll end off on a neutral note here. I would lift it at the CPU National Championships in the bench only, and I didn't bomb, but I also didn't do very, very good as well. I was 17 and a half kilos under my best, and it was a max effort. Obviously, I haven't been prioritizing training as I'm down in Chile, but still did what I could. I placed second in my class. And then the rest of the week, I was actually one of the Team Alberta coaches. I had 22 athletes that I was responsible for on Team Alberta, and then I had 8 other athletes from other provinces that are my athletes as well. So I had 30 athletes in total that I was coaching the week. So it was very busy, and they were long days, but everything was on time for the most part, and it was a very well run meet. And you have to have long days if you're running 400 people through in a single week. But it was very well run and an awesome job. Joel and his team put on a great nationals. I do want to roll into the episode now with Clifton Pho, the interview. It's an unbelievable interview. He has a lot of great wisdom to share, and looking forward to playing this for you. And here we go. This week on the podcast, we're sitting down with Clifton Pho. And if you don't know who Clifton Pho is, why don't we just get Clifton to introduce himself, and welcome to the podcast, buddy. Tell us about your background and what you're about.
Thanks for having me on here. So my name's Clifton. I'm a 66 kilo junior powerlifter in the CPU, and started lifting about, I'd say, I've been lifting since I was in junior high, but I started actually powerlifting about 4 years ago. I had my first competition in 2013. I was at Power Surge in Edmonton, and then I went on to do provincials. Took a break because I got injured, and then did provincials again, then nationals in 2016, and then made my way to Worlds, and here I am, just competed at nationals again. So
yeah, so I actually, maybe people don't know, but I'm the president of the Alberta Powerlifting Union. I don't really say that too much on the podcast, but I've actually seen you come into the APU and sort of grow over the last few years. And I remember first sort of noticing you at the 2014 provincial championships. That was in Olds, Alberta. And I don't know if you walked away with the best lifter there, but you certainly had a really high raw Wilks. And I think a lot of people took notice of your deadlift. And that's obviously, I'm not going to say it's your claim to fame, because you're obviously a fantastic power lifter in terms of the total, but you do have a pretty unreal deadlift. So why don't you just walk us through sort of your nationals experience? You just competed at nationals. Tell us how you did, and you qualified again for Worlds in Belarus. So now a 2-time national team member. So tell us a little bit about how the nationals went for you.
Ooh, well, nationals was a bit of a trip this year. First off, getting to Saguenay was quite difficult. We ran straight into the blizzard, so there's a bunch of delays, and we didn't really get on our. We were waiting for someone to come into Saguenay so we could drive up to Saguenay from there, but their flight actually didn't end up coming. But eventually we ended up getting to Saguenay, which is great. But it was kind of a humbling experience because I had some friends back in Edmonton who couldn't even make it to the trip, and I was actually going to take the same flight as them. So right off the bat, I was just really humbled to even make it to the meet in the first place, because a simple thing such as the weather could, a whole year's worth of training just down the drain just like that.
Absolutely.
But moving on, I got to Saguenay. Wasn't really sure how things would go after that because, stuck in the airport for 10 hours. You don't have the right foods. You wasn't sure I was going to make weight. Actually, part of it, I was planning on just moving up to 74 for a second. But this is the last year to do that, so why not, right?
Just for people who don't know, so you mentioned that you would have moved up to 74, and this is the last year to do it. For those who don't know, the CPU actually passed a proposal at the AGM this year, where at the national level now, and only at the national level, as soon as you submit your weight class and you get to that 21-day out mark, you cannot change after 21 days out. That's kind of following the IPF rules, where you can't change your weight class within 21 days of the competition. So this is the last year, and I know a lot of people were sort of moving around weight classes, and it was an organizational headache because you'd have 5-10 lifters not show up for a weigh-in and didn't really tell anybody, and then the next day they would show up for the heavier class and there'd be more people in that class. So that's one of the reasons why it happened. But you weighed in at 66. You had this crazy travel. Tell us about the actual competition and some of the numbers you put up.
Sure. So warming up for squats, I came into the meet with a goal of getting 500 Wilks. So I warmed up, and the warm-ups actually didn't feel super great, but I know that once I hit the platform, things would kind of move itself. Hit my opener of 202.5 kilos on the squat, which moved good. Then jumped up to 215, and I smoked that one as well. So then decided to go for a small PR at 220 kilos. But right out of the hole, I just shot up, and I kind of forgot to drive back because I was so focused on hammering the depth because the calls were strict that day, let's call it.
Yes.
And then, so this was actually the first time I've missed a squat on strength. So by that, I mean I didn't even squat up the weight on my third attempt. And I kind of made a joke because I never went 3-on-3 on bench. So I said, since I missed a squat, I'll probably go 3-on-3 on bench and maybe deadlifts too. And then moving on to bench, which did happen, by the way. Moving on to bench, started off with 132.5 kilos for my opener. They had some pretty long pauses, but I kind of expected that, so there was no problem there. Then hit 140 kilos, which moved good too, and then went for a small little jump at 142.5 because I just wanted to build up my total so that I could Wilks 500 on my second attempt with a reasonable jump. And then came deadlifts. Opener was 255 kilos, moved pretty easy, then jumped to 273 kilos, which moved even easier, and then 283 kilos for the unofficial world record. So
yeah, that's so cool, man. And actually, for those of us who were at the event or were watching the live stream, that moved really easily. Like it was such a smooth lift. Were you really confident going into that, knowing that it was going to be that easy, or were you kind of like surprised when you actually got it up that easily?
Actually, don't mean to sound cocky or anything, but I didn't really have any doubts going that lift. A couple weeks ago, I actually hit 283 for a relatively easy single. And things are moving super well. It actually took a lot of restraint not to go any heavier. I was talking to Shane, and he's like, don't be greedy. I'm like, yeah, you're right. And then I kind of made a deal with myself to pull in the warm-up room afterwards, which we'll probably get to that later. But I think actually the strange thing was the heaviest deadlift I had was probably my last warm-up on the Alico bar in the back. Or felt the heaviest.
Like anyway. In terms of your entire training cycle? In terms of the heavy. Okay,
in terms of the competition. Yeah.
Yeah. So, why don't we just get into that right now? Like, I don't know if Ryan and Steve saw this, but you actually did go into the warm room. I don't know if it was that day or the day after. and you did pull, I think it was 290, you said, in the warm room. And just tell us about that. Like, why did you do that? and yeah, what was going on there?
Oh well, this I don't even know where to start. Well, after I came back and pulled 283, I wanted to pull right away, but the other flight was already warming up, so I'm like, okay, that's all good. And eventually, I found a small little time frame that I could start warming up and pull again. And the reason I did it is just I find that when you have it's almost like in any other sport when you're throwing a basketball or something, and you're just shooting 3-pointers, but you miss your last one. You kind of have to end the day where you sink a 3-pointer and then leave. So I kind of had to itch to deadlift and just see what I could do because I know I had more. And then I thought about, like at a seminar we had in Edmonton, Mike Desher was talking about how that day he loaded up his deadlift and that was the max. That might have been the heaviest he'd ever been able to lift. So most of it was just for fun, but I really just wanted to see what I could do. So I went in the back, started warming up. And
now this was the next day, right?
This was the next day. Yeah, this was the next day.
So the day after you lifted, where most people feel like horrible, you decided
I actually
to
felt
pull the
pretty
max.
horrible. I actually got treatment from a chiro that day too, and he rubbed like that tiger balm type stuff, and things felt even worse after. But I hate that stuff. Yeah, no, things didn't feel great, but honestly, I was just looking to pull something that felt even remotely heavy so I could just walk away going like, okay, I'm good and just stop lifting. But yeah, I decided to grab a beer with some friends and start lifting. And yeah, it was pretty unorthodox.
So you had a beer before this.
I was throughout the lifting. And I was expecting to maybe pull like 100, 200 kilos and go like, this feels heavy. Then I can walk away. So I slapped on a red, then another red, then another red, then another red. I was actually debating pulling a Keith McConey and just not warm up at all, but can't do that. And then did 220 and then 265 and then 290. 290 moved. It actually moved pretty good. And then I started cramping a bit, so I actually decided to call it there. I already was stripping the weights, and then people started coming in the back and go like, "Oh, you should try 300. You should try 300." I'm like, no, I don't want to try 300. I already blew up my hand, and I was cramping. And I'm like, no, I'm good. But they loaded it anyways. And I believe Trent went up to Gino and said, "Hey, did you know Clifton's trying 300 in the back?" And Gino's like, "What?" And then next thing you know, he starts announcing it, and I'm like in the back. I'm like, "What the heck is going on?" It still feels like a dream. And everyone was rushing to the back room. Even the live stream camera person run to the back room, and I didn't know it was actually on the live stream too. And everyone was just watching me pull in the warm up room. It was kind of unreal.
Did you make the 300?
No. Looking back at the footage, I didn't really set my back tight enough. So right when it came off the floor, it just pulled me into a rounded cat position. So
did you pull with straps, or did you in the warm room, or what did you hook?
Hook grip, always hook grip. I find I actually pull better with hook grip, and I don't think I had straps on me anyways. So
yeah, I was gonna
very cool, Steve.
Say, so prior to your best pull before you have the national record, right? 265.5.
Yeah.
Right. So in that about a year's time, you put on like 25 kilos to your deadlift.
Well, yeah. So in regards to my deadlift, I guess I'd start at the beginning. I started with conventional, and I actually started doing sumo because I had some pain, and actually, strangely enough, I had pain in my hips, and I was pulling sumo, and sumo didn't really hurt. So I don't know. The body works in mysterious ways. But I was actually running a club fair for the U of A, and me and Jason, we had a bar there, and we were just practicing sumo all day. And then afterwards, I decided to go do a quick little. Actually, I was just stopping by the gym, and my friend was deadlifting, and this was a bigger guy. He's like probably 120 kilos, so he's loading up by the reds. And my max at this point was like 220 kilos on conventional. So I was like, oh, I guess I'll practice sumo with you. So we did 1 red, 2 red, 3 red, and then he slapped on a 4th red. I'm like, dude, this is my max. I guess I'll try it. And then I pulled it and it went pretty good. And then I actually ended up pulling a sumo PR at 240 kilos, which was like a 15 to 20 kilo PR the first time I pulled sumo. And I'm like, oh, maybe I have something here. So started pulling sumo.
Yeah. So would you say sort of the strength that you've gained has in the last year of pulling sumo has just simply been technical improvements, like figuring out that movement pattern?
Yeah. I would say it is technique is probably the number one thing, because I mean, if things are feeling off one day, 150 kilos just feels super hard. Whether it's keeping up with my mobility or keeping my hips healthy. And so yeah, like I think leading up to this nationals, last nationals, looking back at my pulls, when I actually attempted 278.5 kilos for the unofficial record at the time, and that actually moved extremely well compared to how I usually pull. Like it just broke off the floor right away, but my hand blew up and I missed the lift right at lockout. So I don't think in terms of gaining like a lot of strength from my programming, I don't think that happened over the year. I just think things have got a lot more consistent. Like the peaking cycle that I did for nationals, it wasn't that I had anything revolutionary or I gained a lot more mass or strength. It was just after transferring to hook grip, I just found my deadlift so much more consistent, because with mixed grip, sometimes I would push the bar away from me and get out of position. But with hook grip, for whatever reason, every week I'm able to hit like an RPE8 single at 250 kilos on a regular basis. Whereas training for nationals last year, I'd come in and I'd hit 240 and it'd feel great. Then the next week I can't even hit 200 because I don't know, maybe I just can't get into position. So
you'd say that the hook grip was probably the biggest change you made there, right?
Hook grip, and also just being better with my mobility, being better with treating my body right, and pushing the weights when you can and taking a step back when you can't.
So when you say
I know a lot of
mobility,
people have been like asking me this question as well about like hook grip, and I think you'd be someone that can kind of expand on this. So I mean, like starting out with hook grip, everyone just like how do you do that, right? It just kills your hands. I can work up to like 80-90%, then my grip's gone. It hurts so much. So what can you kind of tell some of the listeners, like how can you build over that like 90% and be like confident and not let that grip go?
So when I started,
and just sort of expanding on what Steve said, I know that I'm just thinking about Bryce Krawczyk, because him and I had a conversation after his day, and he's like, screw this, I'm not doing mixed grip anymore. I'm going to switch to hook grip because he needs to become more consistent at the movement. Like, so what would you say for people who want to switch? What's sort of the roadmap to getting there?
Well, to begin with, I guess I'll share a bit of my experience on hook grip. When I first started hook grip, I couldn't hook anything. It was just painful, hard. And I did what people said, build up the strength, just keep doing it, do it on your warm-ups. Then when you can't, stop doing hook grip. But what I found worked for me is actually one day I was just trying hook grip and I was able to actually finish a whole rep for once. I mean, I couldn't hold out the top at all, but I was able to hold on to it for a little bit. And then this was when I started, maybe hook grip will work. So I only did hook grip on singles because you only have to hook a single. And I found doing rep work and trying to build the strength, I'm not saying it's bad, but I think keeping your thumbs healthy is another thing. Same thing with hand care and keeping your callus healthy, because if your hands are all roughened up, then it doesn't really matter how much grip strength you have. You're probably going to tear something, and just having rough calluses on your hand and holding onto a bar will make it hurt that much more. But with doing hook grip, another thing I would say is you really have to commit to it, in the sense that you only pull hook grip and only hook grip and straps. That's it. Don't go back to mixed grip, because if you go back to mixed grip, you're probably like, oh, mixed grip isn't that bad. And then you just kind of repeat the whole cycle. But for me, hook grip always hurts. And there's times where I can't hook grip, but I know that in competition, I'd be able to hold on to that single, and that's kind of all that matters. So don't be discouraged if you're in training and you're doing like straps all the time and maybe hooking once and you can barely hold on to it. Because I think it's if you can hold on to it, I think it's just a mental thing to remind yourself to hold on to it for the down command. But yeah.
That's great. That's great advice. Ryan, what were you going to say? Because you had a question.
I was going to add on to that. I personally don't find hook grip hurts more when the weight gets heavier. It hurts the same amount no matter how heavy it is. So just grin and bear it. If you can get through any rep, you're fine. And like I think you pull with straps most of the time, right, Clifton?
Mm-hmm. Actually, I kind of joked around that hook grip just has a limited amount of uses, and it doesn't matter how much weight's on the bar. So I actually have some sessions where it's hurting a lot. I'd pull with hook grip, then I pull with straps, then hook grip, then with straps, and just kind of save my thumb for that top single. But I do think that in competition, I also take an Advil, and that kind of helps take off the pain on the thumbs, so I don't feel it as much. But
so another thing that listeners would probably want to know as well. So when you're like grabbing the bar, do you think about grabbing like all of your thumb, just the end of the fingernail there? Because I mean, like for me, for example, when I'm doing, I think of just grabbing like as much as I can and just hanging on for the ride.
I've actually been planning to experiment with that, but right now I just grab as much as I can, and I find when I pull into position, it kind of slides out to the spot that it needs to be anyways. So I probably could just start by grabbing like a bit of my thumb, and it'll stay there. But what I'm doing now, I think like what I'm trying to say is it ends up in the same position no matter what, no matter how you grip it. So I'd say whatever works for you. I mean, if you don't grab your whole thumb, it might not hurt as much off the bat, but I'd probably have to experiment with that before I can say any more. So,
Clifton, I'm super pumped because you qualified for the world team this year, and I know last year in Texas. So for those of you who don't know, Clifton placed second in his class, and it was actually you were pulling for the gold medal at the end, and just couldn't make the lift. The lift was a 275. Now, obviously, you're pulling 290, and you're going to be one of the heaviest deadlifters of the meet, which is the lifter of the meet. You were the heaviest deadlifter of the meet last year, but it's looking like it's going to be the same thing this year. So you're going to be in a really strong position to again pull for the win. I do want to talk about looking forward to Belarus and sort of your plans there. But since we're talking about sumo and it's one of your specialties, what would you say outside of hook grip? What would you say are sort of the biggest cues that you use for sumo? What are the biggest cues? Like what are you thinking about when you're setting up for the deadlift?
I did actually put out a video on this, but the cues that I would use is I like thinking about I pull the tension out of the bar first, and I kind of anchor myself in the bar, like almost like when you're trying to pull a nail out of anywhere really. But spreading the floor and pulling the tension out of the bar is probably the things I use the most when I'm setting up. And then when I actually pull, I'm always driving back. I'm never just driving straight up. So I'm almost like a hinge, just trying to anchor the bar off the floor. So.
Yeah, that's great cueing. And also for you mentioned earlier that you spent a lot of time doing mobility work. What are sort of your mobility drills or things that you do to sort of help you get into the bottom position of the sumo? Do you have sort of a routine for that?
When I first started, I would just kind of do everything blindly. I'd roll, I'd stretch, I'd do all the mobility work that a therapist would give you, such as like, hip hikes or leg abductions and stuff like that. But now since I've grown and I kind of know the injuries or not injuries, but the warm-up protocol I need on the day-to-day basis, it actually changes. So if one day I feel my glute is giving me problems, I'll roll it out a bit and do some stretching on that. If one day I feel it's actually my adductors, then I might do some abductions and stuff like that. But one thing I actually really find helps with anyone looking to improve their mobility for sumo or just in general is just doing that any type of leg adduction and abduction. So we kind of call them good girl, bad girl machines. The one where you close and open your legs. So I find that helps my.
Now, would you do that
hip pain.
before you lift, or would you do that after you lift?
I would do that after usually. It makes me pretty sore. So
Very cool. And now let's just talk about programming really quickly for the deadlift. Like, are you pulling with quite high frequency, just trying to practice the movement pattern? How are you actually walk us through exactly what you did sort of leading up to nationals this year, the last 4 to 6 weeks? What was sort of the plan? What were you doing?
So for nationals, what I was doing was I would have, I guess you could call it a heavy day, where I work up to a heavy single. And the heavy single was more so to train my hook grip or just get me more comfortable with the hook grip. Not so much to get any specific training stimulus out of it. And then I would just do some down sets to get some volume and get some movement in there. And then I'd have a second day where it's accessory based. So I started off doing, I was really experimenting at this point. I was starting off doing chains, and I enjoyed chains, but they took way too long to set up. So I did not enjoy them actually. And then I did pause deadlifts, and I also tried deficit deadlifts. So the basic premise for me, I've always found that when I did a lot of high volume work or tried to run traditional programs that people had, like I ran Russian squat routine for a little bit, and I just hated having too much volume because I just found my technique just goes to shit. And I don't set up properly anymore. So I do find that lower frequency definitely works better for me, and having a bigger, harder session. And then just focusing on getting my body healthy the rest of the week to train for the next session, rather than hammering it out every week or every other day, because that just kind of messes my body up. And actually every training program that I've kind of, like every generic training program that I've done throughout my life has just ended up hurting me. So that's kind of how I just, and you got to believe that maybe that just doesn't work for you, that specific type of program. So don't go chasing, like if Russian scout routine works for you, don't go chasing like Smolov or something, because it's probably going to end up the same. So
Man, that's such great advice. And it's interesting because I know Ryan, before we podcasted, was talking about he's actually going to be reducing some of his frequency and having some slightly harder sessions and recovering the rest of the week. It's just important to hear that, you sort of found a system that works for you, and that it's always just sort of this constant evolution of finding what works and staying healthy in the long run, because we all get beat up, and unfortunately it's just part of the powerlifting game. Like, you are going to get an injury. Like, it's as predictable as anything else in the sport. And you want to try to limit those moments where you're getting injured because of poor programming and planning. So it sounds like you've really found a method that works. One day that's sort of competition movements, and one day that's sort of variations, which is awesome. One question I did have, and I know I was thinking as you were talking about you going into the warm room and pulling the 290 and only doing 280 in the meet. A lot of people, when they think about attempt selection, think they need to sort of max out in a competition setting. Like, they just have to absolutely grind a rep and do as much as they can possibly do, and risk failing, like, only putting on the bar what they think they can do maybe 30% of the time or 50% of the time. And for you had mentioned that, like, you got some advice from maybe I think it was Shane or whoever was handling you on competition day about, don't be cocky, just like let's just get that record, that unofficial record, so that you can say that you have it in the books, even though you knew that you had more in you. Can you talk about that? Because like I know that from my experience, coaching we might know where people's maxes are, where their 100% capacity is, but in an international meet, when you're trying to vie for positions, you might only need to go to the 97% mark, or even lower sometimes, when you're going to make the lift, it's going to secure the position, and you don't max out. So what is sort of your attempt selection philosophy, and what was going on with that?
Well, I think it all comes down to setting your goals and just staying real with yourself, in the sense that, I mean, if you're going into nationals and all you wanted to do was pull that maximal attempt and grind that out, then by all means, I totally believe that you can be able to do that. But if you're at nationals to set yourself up for worlds or to podium or to hit that record and that's it, then just do that. So I don't think it's a matter of you should always be like, I do believe you should be smart with your attempt selections, take what's there on the day. But I really just think it comes down to what your goals are. Because I mean, for me, I went to provincials in 2015, and I've always had issues with cramping near the deadlift. I think I've kind of worked that out, which also has helped my deadlifts, because I actually cramped at Worlds on my last pull, which is why I think I missed it. But anyways, so at Provincials 2015, I actually missed my opener deadlift. And I wasn't looking to win. I wasn't looking to win best lifter. I just really wanted that national deadlift record. So I jumped up to the weight anyways, and then luckily I actually got it. But had I come into meet saying, hey, I just want to win best lifter, I would have done the opening attempt again. I would never have jumped up. But that was the only goal I had. And whether the goal is good or not is a completely different story. It's dependent on everyone, but that's what I wanted. So I did that. And at nationals, what I wanted was a 500 Wilks, and I got that on my second attempt. So on the third attempt, it was just, well, there's nothing to lose. There's nothing really else to gain. So just load up the world record and just make that official and have fun afterwards. So,
man, that's such great advice. I mean, that is such great advice. I love actually everything you just said there. And I can just actually contrast that with a story. And I don't want to call this lifter out, but I will tell the story. Luke Tremblay, a 105 lifter, fantastic lifter. He actually made the world team this year as a junior. He'll be going as a 105. He loaded up on the second attempt the national bench the junior national bench press record. I don't know what it is off the top of my head, but it was just over 400, let's say 185 kilos. And he just missed it on his second. He missed it not on strength, but because of his butt came up. And so I was actually right there behind the curtains, and I was coaching my athlete. I think it was, I can't remember who I was coaching, but I was right there. And Luke actually turned to me. He's like, "What do you think, man?" Like, he's like, what should I do? Because I know that he knew that he wanted to go more, and he was kind of looking for validation from me to say, yeah, go up. Like, that was easy. Like, you're going to be able to get the next one. But the advice that I had was, no, repeat it. Like, get the record, like secure the record. Of course you probably have more, but you don't have the record yet. And he actually turned in an attempt that was 2 or 5 kilos heavier than his second attempt, and he missed it. And he didn't miss it because his butt came up this time. He missed it because of strength, and he wasn't able to actually get the record. And so I think there's lots to be learned about attempt selection and what your goals are for the day. And I don't know what his goals was. Maybe he wanted, the heavier bench and not the record. I mean, probably not the case, but it comes back to goals, and everything you said is absolutely great advice. Ryan, Steve, do you have any questions on that?
The only thing I want to talk about a little bit. So you actually pulled 283 in the gym a couple weeks before, if I remember correctly, on Facebook. And then your third attempt at the meet was 283, and it was quite easy at the meet. Was there any plan to open heavier? Had you gotten your third squat, would you have opened with like a 500 Wilks so you could have been able to go heavier? It's just odd, like, to me, doing a third attempt in the gym, you know what I mean, is not something I would usually coach.
Well, in the gym, the 283 was kind of half peer pressure, but half wanted to do it. The 283 moved at I called it around a 9. So I was working up to RP singles at 9 that day. And actually, when I pulled 255, that was on the warm-up day. That was actually pretty hard because it got out of positioning, and things got easier as positioning got better. But in terms of at nationals with the attempt selection, if I had got my 220 squat, I was considering opening with the 500 Wilks. But the thing was, because I like opening with something that I can do on any given day that I can at least triple with, that, like, if I got woken up in the middle of the night, I could just get under the bar and do it under no circumstance. And because I've only been pulling singles, 255, like, I've never tripled 255. So I knew I had it, but I just wanted to play it safe and stay in the game. So, I mean, that's what openers are always for me. But moving forward, I think I'm going to have to be more aggressive with my deadlifts because of the way they are. Like I'm at the point where the singles move at like a 6 or a 7, but if I do another one, I might not be able to. But they move like really good. So I was joking around saying, oh, I could open at 273, but no real handler is gonna say, oh yeah, let's just get rid of your first attempt and bump your second attempt to your first attempt. So, yeah. So
I love your people have said that I'm a very conservative attempt selector, and I am, and I'm just so biased when I'm hearing you talk right now, being conservative, and I think it's the right approach. Like you're setting yourself up for this 500 Wilks goal, but you're also like, you have to get a spot on the world team. You can't be bombing. Like there was instances during the weekend where Kelly Branton, if he didn't make his third squat, Bryce Krawczyk missing his first 2 deadlifts and might not making the world team. Like there's just instances where you just never know, and like you just kind of want to secure that spot. There's sort of this weird contrast though from what I'm hearing. Like you're really intelligent and like cogent when you're talking about your training, and you're very thoughtful, but then also you have these moments where you're just like, well, yeah, I was peer pressured in the gym to do this, or I had a beer and then I went and did 290 in the warm room. Like where, like, is there like, which sort of side do you fall on? Like, are you more like, for people listening, I don't want people to think like you're saying the wrong way. Like, are you like a really thoughtful, sort of methodical when it comes to your programming, and just every so often you kind of go off, or where's the balance, and what is sort of your structure?
I think I've always been the type of person to kind of be on 2 opposite ends of a spectrum. So, I mean, I have the times where like I really want to know what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. But at the same time, like I'm there to have fun and enjoy myself. So I think it's just a happy medium. I'm doing my own programming, learning about myself, and I'm very methodical in that way. But I'm also where if I'm in the moment, I want to enjoy the moment. And let's say I pulled that 290 and my training, if you could measure it, let's say it pushes back a week, I'm totally fine with that, because like I'm at nationals, I'm enjoying myself. And when I was actually going to worlds for the first time, I actually found that I wasn't really enjoying powerlifting as much. And I asked myself, well, why is that? I asked myself the hard questions like, what am I powerlifting for? Why am I doing this? What if I don't make PRs anymore? Would I still be powerlifting? And just really like dive deeper into what I'm doing and what I'm doing it for. And I just found out, well, aside from competing and making progress with myself, going to worlds and experiencing powerlifting with the whole powerlifting community, and one thing where I was going to nationals, I actually didn't know if I wanted to go just because I didn't really have a roommate. I didn't have anyone to go with. And I'm like, well, it's not that fun when you go travel to alone. So I mean, I'm not really sure if that answers your question, but I think the balance comes from just being real with yourself. And like a lot of people think balance means you have to be in the middle of the teeter-totter at all times, but you could run back and forth all you want and the teeter-totter might still stay in the middle, right? So
no, that was a perfect answer. I think and I've found this with some of my athletes, you want sort of athletes to adhere to the program and follow the process. But if they're not enjoying that process and they're following the protocols and they're getting stronger, but they're not enjoying that process, at some point that progress is it's going to halt because more of their psychology than anything else. They're not going to want to go into the gym and train and do the program. So if you can somehow have opportunities, whether having fun could be doing a single at 9, and maybe it's not at the most appropriate time in the training phase, but like if they're going to have fun and it's going to keep them in the game a little bit longer, then why not, right? Ryan, what's your perspective on that?
Yeah, no, it makes sense. It's you have to enjoy it, right? I mean, no one's getting rich doing this, so if you're not having fun, at least in sometimes, like obviously 90% of powerlifting is hard work, and that's what people don't really see on Instagram. They just see the fun stuff, but 90% of it is just going in and doing work. So you got to have times where you're gonna have fun doing what you're doing. So, I mean, 100% agree.
Clifton, we all know we're going to Worlds the next few months here. I remember talking to you at Nationals. Were you mentioning that you may be doing the pro show as well, like the deadlift only? I remember you saying that.
Well, actually, I do want to do the pro show, but yesterday I just found out they're 2 weeks apart, and Belarus is quite expensive, so I might not be able to anymore. So I'm not really sure. I'll probably be going to Worlds if I can work out the finances and stuff like that. But yeah, I did want to do the deadlift meet at the pro show. I'm kind of sad that
if anybody's listening to the podcast, somebody throw Clifton a sponsorship. Let's get this guy to the Worlds.
But no, I did want to do the pro show simply because I've always wanted to do a deadlift meet. And sadly, I missed out on the Arnold, and the Arnold actually has a minimum absolute weight requirement for you to do the Arnold, and that's 320 kilos, so not quite there yet. So I thought the pro show would be a cool thing. And I mean, the nice thing I like about stuff in Canada, like Nationals and the pro show, is it's a big event, but it's local enough that a lot of people go to it. Like, you go to Worlds and it's great. It's a great experience. There's lots of people, but not everyone can go with you, and not everyone will be there simply because, I mean, you have to qualify to make the team anyways, and everything's a little more spread out. I remember in Colleen, like, you try to hang out with people, but everyone's in a different hotel, and it's like, oh, well, what are you gonna do now? Whereas Nationals, everything's like in one place. And so
what are your goals when you touch down in Belarus? I know that you probably have lofty goals, and I'm assuming I think I know what they are already, but tell us what you want to do there, what you want to accomplish.
Well, aside from just having a great experience, I always the goal would be to win the weight class, get some points for the team. That's obviously a goal. Deadlift the record, which is another goal. So if no one breaks it by then, it'd be 283 kilos. And then the last goal would probably be try to make it on one of the best lifters for junior at the banquet. So,
man, I'm listening to this entire podcast. I just love everything you're saying, man, because a lot of people just have these singular goals around like just one narrow thing that is like might not be possible or realistic. And here you are having like just 4 goals, so 4 opportunities to find some success in the meet. And the first one was to have a good time. Like a lot of people put so much pressure on themselves to just do these numbers, and man, the first thing should just be to enjoy the process and to have a good time, and like you're going all the way over there, like, yeah, the lifting is what you're going there for, but it's way more than just the lifting. And I just love everything you're saying.
Clifton, do you have anything you have in mind that you may want to give away to the listeners?
Yeah, actually, I was thinking, so I started this thing called Lift On.
I've been following, don't worry.
Yeah.
I love Lift On.
So if anyone wants a sticker, I'd send you a sticker for free. And then if anyone wants a shirt, I could give away a couple shirts for sure. So
cool.
I don't know how you guys can set that up.
Yeah, we'll do a draw. We'll put up a link on our website, and we can just go to CanadianPowerliftingPodcast.com, and we'll put up a link, and we'll send away a free T-shirt. And how can people get in contact with you if they want to learn more, talk to you, add you on Instagram, all that stuff?
Yeah, so they can follow me on Instagram. It's Clifton_Pho. And then you could also add me on Facebook or follow my YouTube channel. It's all Clifton Pho. And yeah, I mean, if they have any questions or anything, feel free to contact me. I'm always happy to help. And lately, actually, a lot of people have been. So it's nice to hear kind words and just kind of help others and give back to the sport. So always here. So
awesome. Thanks, buddy. I really appreciate you coming on the podcast, and really looking forward to seeing the journey. And I know that Ryan has one more thing to say.
Just going back to what Abby said. Hey, Clifton, do you have any sponsors?
Yes, my best sponsors. SVD Canada and Inner Strength Products. Honestly, I wanted to say something before that, but no.
Just checking. Checking.
Yeah. No, seriously. Thanks for the opportunity. I mean, actually, I'll tell you a quick little story before we go. After Nationals last year, I was talking to my friend Steven, And this was when I actually decided to go all in on powerlifting, in the sense that like really invest into the sport. I've always grown up doing stuff like rock climbing or track and field, and I'd stop afterwards. And then he asked me, "Oh, what if you got sponsored?" And I said, "Well, but I don't want to be sponsored by like a supplement company because I don't really take supplements." And he's like, "Well, who would you want to be sponsored by?" I'm like, I think the only company I'd really relate with is Inner Strength. And then next thing you know, a month later, Ryan messages me, and it was just an unreal experience. And it's been an unreal experience so far. So thank you, Ryan and Rhea.
Hey, we're happy to sponsor athletes across Canada. So
Awesome. That was a good story. Thanks for sharing that, Clifton. We're looking forward to seeing the journey down to Belarus, and obviously watching for the results. And we'll talk to you soon.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
thanks, Clifton.
Thanks, man. We'd like to thank Clifton for coming on the podcast. So Clifton is starting up a company called Lift On. So he's decided.
Wait, I don't know if he's starting. Is it a company?
I think it's.
I don't know. Like, what is it Lift On?
It's like he said it was. He said it was a thing. All right, we'll say it's a thing.
Okay.
So he's starting a thing called Lift On, and he's decided to give away 2 T-shirts. So if you guys go to our website, CanadianPowerliftingPodcast.com, under contests, you guys can enter your names in there to win the Lift On T-shirts.
I want a Lift On T-shirt, and yeah, awesome. That was a great episode. Really liking what this guy has to say, and we have to get him back on afterwards because I'm looking forward to seeing how he does. Hopefully, he walks away with the gold medal around his neck. That's it. That's all. We're gonna wrap this episode up now.
Hopefully, we'll get back to a more normal schedule as lives get more normal here. So.
We keep saying that, and we are going to do it this time. We're going to achieve a normal schedule every 2 weeks. We'll keep it up to date on the Facebook page, Canadian Powerlifting Podcast. Go give it a like and stay up to date. And that's it. We'll catch you later. You've been listening to the Canadian Powerlifting Podcast, the podcast that brings you the best of powerlifting in Canada, hosted by Stephen Cassioli, Ryan Stinn, and myself, Abby Silverberg. Please follow us on Instagram and check out our website for some great free powerlifting content at www.canadianpowerliftingpodcast.com. If you like what you heard today, please rate our podcast on iTunes, and don't forget to listen to every other Thursday for a brand new episode.